We've got a great panel here today to talk about monetization. How do we use the first-party asset we've created together to go and deliver great experiences to customers for the benefit of our vendor partners? And so we've got a esteemed panel that I'm going to allow to introduce themselves, but looking forward to this discussion. So please, Ben.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Ben Wiesel. I'm here with the Dick's Sporting Goods team. I'm assuming everybody here is familiar. And quick show of hands, actually, who's got kids in youth sports? This is always fun. Thank you for your patronage, and we're very, very sorry. I promise we don't set any of the prices. I'm a couple of weeks away from 10 years with Dick's Sporting Goods, the last 3 of which have been on the media side, championing the build and launch of our retail media network, which we very creatively called Dick's Media. But really excited to be here today and to speak with you all about some of the things that we've learned and some things that we're still learning.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Small, Director of Retail Data Partnerships at The Trade Desk. And the role that I play at The Trade Desk is really twofold. So I partner with retailers, like the gentleman on stage with me today, to bring their data into the Trade Desk in a way that is really portable so that they can monetize their first-party data asset in third-party programmatic self-service capacity. And so this can provide a really great additional revenue stream for retail media networks as they are trying to grow and find new ways to really help accelerate the growth of their retail media networks. So I do that primarily, but the other part of my job is I actually work with brands and retailers to help evangelize why they should be tapping into this really rich retailer first-party data as a premium extension to any of their audience-based targeting strategies that they're doing in programmatic offsite. So I help educate them on how they should be using this as a proxy for first-party data if they're a CPG brand and they don't have their own, or an extension of their data strategy to expand on top of their first-party strategy, or if they're a non-endemic brand, a way to really tap into these durable signals. And I'll talk about more of that in the next few minutes together, but glad to be here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan Dunn. I'm a product director at Advance, powered by Loblaw. If you don't know Loblaw, we're Canada's largest grocer and pharmacy chain. We have a bunch of other businesses as well. I usually describe it as, for Americans, we're kind of like Albertsons plus Kroger plus CVS plus a bunch of other things. It gives us a really great foundation for a retail media business. The line we often like to say is 90% of Canadians live within a 10-minute drive of one of our stores. We also have Canada's largest loyalty program, which is the foundation for what I do. So I'm in charge of what we call offsite media, so it's leveraging that data asset to find our customers wherever they happen to be in anything that we don't own. So if it's not our e-commerce sites or it's not in our stores, that's kind of me. So everything we're going to be talking about very near to, and dear to my heart and my day job. And thank you, Imperative, for having me here today. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, thank you all for joining us. And I think we spent today talking a lot about how to personalize and deliver wonderful experiences to our customers. And a lot of that tends to focus on the own channels because those are more direct and a little easier to understand in some ways. And certainly there's been some paid media discussion. What I want to talk about today, though, is how that's intersecting with the way that you're interacting with your partners and developing new and differentiated offerings for your vendor merchant partners to deliver ultimately what we've heard so much about is sales. We're trying to sell more products and deliver great experiences for customers and also for these brands. The paid channels, I think everybody is well familiar with the fact that the way that those different component parts fit together is changing pretty fast, and it's unclear maybe where it's all going, but what I think we can all agree with in this room is that it has everything to do with your first-party data, and this is the differentiator for retail media networks. This is why we see all manner of consumer brands finding new and different ways to create experiences for their customers that also bring value to the partner, and there's a long list of different challenges, and so I'm curious to hear from Sarah first, if you could, as your market-wide view of what are some of the specific issues that you're seeing your clients and partners when it comes to facing, and how are they prioritizing what those are in the monetization context.
Yeah, I think I sit in a really interesting intersection where I do work with the retail media networks as well as the brands and the agencies. So I hear a lot about the collective challenges that each party is facing, and what we do at the Trade Desk is really help them find solutions to these challenges. So I'll kind of answer this in twofold with kind of both sides of the industry perspective. So I'll start with the brand side. I think brands are finding it really challenging to scale how they activate across retail media networks. There are over 200 that exist today, and all of you have really great individual data that you bring to the table that's so powerful, but it's impossible for any brand marketer to be able to execute across 200 in a scalable capacity. So ultimately what it comes down to is this having to select which media networks to put their dollars into, and it's hard to choose where those dollars go, right? And so as there's this fragmentation, there's kind of this need of how do I actually just make this data more portable, right? Like I want to access this data in a way that I can bring it into my buying best practices. I can leverage my preferred media rates, especially when we're talking about offsite, right? Onsite is its own situation, and you guys bring a lot of value to your onsite owned and operated properties, but all of you have solutions on offsite and how to leverage your data asset offsite to bring users down the funnel. And so it comes back to this want and this need for data portability so that they can have more flexibility control, and then also just really to understand the holistic picture of how media is impacting sales across the retailers. So that's their big challenge. I think on the other side, and you guys can agree or disagree with me here, but I think retail media networks are seeing a lot of challenge to grow their revenue streams and find ways to differentiate yourselves among those 200, as well as how do we grow outside of our owned and operated properties. And really what that comes down to, the answer is data portability, right? It's meeting that need of the market. But how do you do that in a way that is plug and play? And I think what I'm really excited about, a lot of the stuff we've seen today from Amperity is finding a way to really make that a low lift, easy to plug into solution for retailers so that you can truly make your data asset available in a third-party ecosystem that is truly self-service. It's not taking lift and valuable resources away from your owned and operated properties, and really allows you to see the benefit of that passive additional revenue stream to help grow, to tap into brand national budgets, to tap into non-endemic budgets and things like that. And so I think the challenge is you want to do this, but how do you do this in a way where you're feeling like you're protecting your asset, that you have the control over how your data is used, and you're not paying this increasingly greater tax, essentially, to work with different providers that are going to enable that for you, which is going to cut into that additional margin. So those are the challenges that I'm seeing today.
There's a lot to unpack there. I think before I want to get into the differentiation thing after this, but I want to start with the priorities that Dix and Advance by Loblaw are focused on right now, and then we'll get into that. But Ben, maybe you could talk a little bit about where your team is focused in particular right now.
Yeah, sure. And well, first of all, I'm guessing I speak for many of us here. Data portability is now firmly planted in my vernacular after hearing Sarah talk about this. But I'd echo a lot of that same sentiment. From the retail, the media network perspective, we have myriad challenges that are out there, but one of the bigger ones is how do we protect that asset? How do we secure our position in a increasingly fragmented marketplace? And so what we don't want to do is have this race to the bottom where everybody is all of a sudden federating their data, and then retail media networks lose some ground that they've worked really hard to build. And so at Dix Media, one of the things that we're focused on doing, looking at where things are headed down in the future, is how do we use automation, data portability to make sure that we can democratize a lot of that data for especially those long tail partners that we have, but really maintain a lot of control with our key strategic partners. We're offering managed service, but we're also tapping into those really, really insightful storytelling pieces that you can only get when you operate through a Dick's Sporting Goods property, because we understand who those consumers are, and it goes a little bit beyond what happens during the time when the media runs, but what does that mean for your business? How do you take that and translate it into something that's actionable? And that's where we think, among some other places that we'll talk about, but where we've got a right to win and still hold on to that precious control that we're going to need to make ourselves valuable, but still lean into where we think the industry is inevitably moving.
What about you
My
guys?
turn?
Yeah.
I mean, the Canadian market's a little bit different. I think to our advantage, it's a little less fragmented. So I mean, I completely agree with the challenges that have been that you've outlined, and this sort of like data custody, like how do you extract value from the data while maintaining custody of it is absolutely a very real problem space. Maybe I'll build with a couple, maybe three things in addition to what you've said that are like very top of mind for us. Like the first is like, how do we use emerging technologies like data clean rooms to extract value? And I call them emerging, like it's been years since we've been talking about them, but my experience is there's a lot of talking and not a lot of walking at this stage. So like, and there's a bunch of reasons around that, interoperability, et cetera, but there's a lot of really legitimate high value use cases that clean rooms can provide. Obviously like alternative IDs and like customer matching, a bunch of measurement use cases. There's great kind of like bring your own data use cases. So as a retailer talking to a bunch of brands, like I recognize that you also have great first-party data assets, and so what can we do together where you bring your data asset to us, we operate in a way that's going to protect everyone's data privacy, that has the right data governance controls, but allows us to then think about insights, or how do we think about like messaging customers in different ways based on the relationship that we have with them, which kind of leads me to the second point, and again, a little bit of a Canadian perspective, but we haven't had our like GDPR, CCPA moment yet. It's coming. We know it's coming, and so we're starting to get ahead of it. But like, rather than get into the minutia around that, what we're trying to think hard about is like, how do we communicate the value that the data exchange between the customer and ourselves is delivering for them? I mean, I think for us, we can ground it in the loyalty program, receiving your loyalty offers and receiving ads from vendors who are trying to like share a great deal with you. There's a lot of kind of synergy between those things, but as there's much greater scrutiny on customer data, on privacy, on like data portability rights, et cetera, that's going to be something that we're going to have to continue to grapple with. And yes, on kind of the operating model stuff. We started managed service. I think it's probably the most natural way for a lot of retailers to start. When you get started, there's a lot of like, don't look behind the curtain while we do this kind of thing for the first little bit and try to figure out how it works. The move to self-serve becomes natural. That's where clients, I think, ultimately want to be, or their agencies certainly want to be. But like increasingly, we're starting to think about how do we like start to meet our clients where they want to be. Maybe one example I'll give that we maybe haven't talked about is sort of in the planning cycle. Maybe back to your point around like RMNs can be difficult to work with. So how do we think about making data accessible to those agencies in their tools in a way that allows you to seamlessly become part of their planning cycle? It's a part of like a, let's be easy to work with and everybody wins.
Yeah, well, so you teed up our next point, which is like measurement.
Just like we planned.
Just like we planned it. And we talked about this earlier today. Measurement, it was a great panel with a lot of fierce agreement, I think, across those panelists. And I'm curious to hear how you're all thinking about measurement, and specifically in the context of having vendors participating and knowing the innate challenge of what can be shared, what shouldn't be shared, and we just want to hear more about what you're being asked of by brands and how you're delivering against that in the context of giving them a differentiated media asset to go buy.
Yeah.
Ben?
Sure. So, I mean, you nailed it there, right? Transparency, at least for us, is the name of the game. And we're trying very hard to make sure that our advertisers are helping govern what that really looks like and what transparency means to them. If we're the ones defining it, it's still that same echo chamber, and I don't know that we're making enough progress if that's the way we approach it. And so for us, we're doing a lot to focus on centralization and automation and the sort of democratization of data. That's the tactical work, but philosophically, where this is all headed for us, and granted, we're still at the beginning of our journey here, but where we're aimed at is trying to focus a little bit less on a lot of what we hear about, which is dollar in translates to dollar out. As far as I'm concerned, we're never getting away from needing to prove incrementality and a really strong return on ad spend. That's just the reality of the world we live in. But how do we evolve that and start to qualify it instead of only quantifying it? And what I mean by that is, at Dick's Sporting Goods, we're sitting on a really healthy set of data that we're not doing enough to tap into yet. And so what we'd like to do is coach our advertisers to say, okay, you drove some incremental return. you guys can feel good. You can go back to your bosses and say that your investment was smart, you did a great job, but what did we actually learn from that? Which might look like the type of customer that we drove that really solid incremental behavior from. Are we driving net new customer acquisitions, which might be important for some of the emerging brands that we work with, or for your Nikes, Adidas, Under Armours of the world? Are we stealing share away from customers that might be loyal to one of their competitors? Are we thinking about driving that behavior with omni-channel consumers, where our data tells us that they're going to be 2, 3, 4, even 5x more beneficial for your brand over the next 10 years, and start weaving in those lifetime value insights? Those are the pieces that start to evolve away from what just happened in the context of when you ran media to how do we use that to actually drive your business forward. Easy said, much harder to do, but that's exactly what we're aimed at. And we think that taking that approach, especially with the transparency, allowing those brands to have their hands and collaborate and what that looks like, especially in a managed service capacity, is what's going to help give us some of that edge and help lead the industry towards that same place.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan, what about Loblaw?
What Ben said. No, but like he said it well. I'll build on it a little bit. This is going to be a big year for measurement at Loblaw. I think we've always had a pretty strong measurement offering. A lot of the same dimensions that you've just talked about, right? Attribution, sales lift, incrementality, customer lifetime value, new retained customers, like helping them do that. Making that giving that omni-channel view is, I think, really where the big focus is. We want and we think we're going to drive the best value both for customers and for our vendor partners if we can give them a really good picture of how activating across all of our customer touch points is powerful for them. I mean, this is the power of the first-party data, and I think, and like here's the plug, like the stuff that Amperity is helping us do is it allows us to see that view of the customer throughout their shopping journey, and so that gives you a really powerful foundation for like that sort of basics of advertising, right message, right time. How does that kind of stuff fit together? Ultimately, like to build another buzzword. Transparency, yes, and accountability. I think we want to be held accountable for what we're doing. No, I think we do want to be held accountable for what we're doing. It's how we know it's working. It's how we're going to drive more spend. And Ben, I think you said it really well. Like, it's not just the sort of, okay, here's what happened. It's that so what, right? Like, what are those insights? Like, we often talk about, everyone probably talks about the flywheel effect of this, right? But okay, here's a plan to reach the customer. How did it work? How did it work? What are we learning from that? So the next time around, it becomes that much better. And yeah, it's complicated. It's taken us a long time to get there. The plumbing, finding the right people who understand it. But that's what it's going to take to really give our advertiser partners the confidence to make it easy for them to say, oh, okay, my investment is better here than what's currently the easy button, which is our good friends in the social media space or more traditional media channels and so on. And so that's kind of the journey we're on.
Yeah, another nice transition for me, because I want to now hear a little bit about the Trade Desk, and I think we've heard some discussion today about your commitment to transparency in the market, and how does that figure into the way that you're enabling your partners on a measurement front here with vendors in particular, but more broadly about the ability to actually understand sales tied back to ad impression and exposure, not just targeting, which not everybody in the market is making available to their advertisers.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think really what we're trying to build in the Trade Desk is a retail data marketplace, right? And that is audience targeting. How can you tap into this really rich, deterministic, shopper-focused data as that premium extension to your targeting strategy at scale across retailers? How can you just really find a shopper, right? You want to find a shopper or somebody that is in a persona or a life stage or a lifestyle segment that aligns with who's in market for your product, right? And so we are trying to enable that from an audience perspective as a marketplace so that brands can tap into this, shopper e-com teams can tap into this if they're sophisticated enough to be able to execute, non-endemics can tap into it, et cetera. But in the same way that we're doing that on the audience side, we're also doing that from a measurement side. And I think measurement marketplace is really where I get the most excited. I'm such a measurement nerd. And I think what's really interesting, and I'll say this, there is always going to be a place for managed service with retail media networks, full stop. We want to help accelerate and complement what you're doing. But you guys bring this expertise to the data set that just because you're giving brands access to data doesn't mean they know how to use it, right? They don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to unpack these really rich insights that are going to help garner better buying practices. And just, I think a lot of times it's like, did my campaign drive ROAS or did it drive lift? And if it didn't, it's unsuccessful. But those insights can actually glean, well, why didn't it? Or what did it drive? Did you actually reach people that are in market for your product with your upper funnel tactics like CTV? These are really, really powerful insights. And you use the word insights, and I love that because these are insights that retail data can give to you that other measurement providers can't, and how can you use those to accelerate your growth? So in terms of what we're kind of doing from a transparency lens is we want to enable a measurement marketplace for advertisers to be able to tap into measurement without all of these silos, right? Like, I think measurement is probably the most fragmented part of the ecosystem today, which is why, entities like the IAB are trying to invest in standardization of retail measurement, because each retailer, you guys have your own methodology, you have your own way of putting together the insights, which can be really powerful to the clients that you're talking to. But for a brand, it's really hard to decipher that, right? Like, how can I compare my results that I'm seeing here at retailer A to this retailer, and how does that actually translate to what I care most about is sales? Like, did my media actually drive sales? And so what we're doing with kind of our marketplace is using partners for retailers to be able to send in their sales data into the trade desk. We can be that third party to do the attribution using the same attribution methodology and standardization across the board in a way that allows brands to have confidence in being able to understand the differences of performance across the retailers. But where it becomes really powerful is actually like consolidating the results, right? Because at the end of the day, what does a brand care about? Did my media drive sales? Period. They're not necessarily so concentrated on, well, did this person from this audience from this retailer purchase within that retailer? I think we can all say we don't only exclusively shop at one retailer, but maybe in Canada. I don't know. There's not as much choice there. But, and so in a good way, I guess. I don't know.
Loblaw's just so great at what they do, I think is what you meant.
Yeah,
Cornered
you don't
the
need
market.
any other retailers in Canada because you guys are excellent.
That's true. We got fast fashion. We got you covered.
Yeah. I mean, my husband makes me go to 5 grocery stores every weekend. So, that's the whole thing. But, essentially bringing it together to say, hey, my programmatic media, my upper funnel tactics drove these sales, and here are all the touch points along the funnel that drove to those sales. And that's what we're trying to do to really enable all boats to rise, right? Because just because your media asset might have driven a sale at another retailer doesn't mean that your media asset is less effective. So how can we pull that together to really show kind of the halo impact of sales across retailers?
Awesome. All right, we're getting close to the end of our time, and I've had to leave with a predictions question. So what are we going to talk about next year on this panel, Ben?
Loaded question, but actually Sarah just touched on something which I think is really important, which is we want all to rise. I think everybody in this community, this industry is understanding that, hey, we can actually all agree on something and do this together and move everything forward. And so I think maybe what that starts to look like, and going back to what we said about portability and everybody trying to protect their assets, I think we all need to recognize what we're each individually good at, whether you're a retailer, whether you're a DSP, whether you're a platform, publisher, agency, whomever. And I think what you're going to start to see is more of these collaborative partnerships, right, that are centered around data. 2-way partnerships, 3-way, 4-way, right, the numbers go on from there. I'll avoid some inappropriate context around it. But point being, I think you're going to start to see more simplification in what is an otherwise fragmented marketplace, where folks start to federate that data and really focus in on what they're really good at, because I think that's how all of us start to win in the end and stop sort of quietly, passive-aggressively fighting each other in the shadows, but be very open about what we're good at and start to move in that general direction. Or at least that's what I'm hopeful that we start to talk about, and we're seeing a little bit of that today.
Mm-hmm. Sarah?
Me next? I mean, we're all friends here. I very much agree with what you said. I think we're seeing a lot more collaboration. We talked about other programs that kind of bring together everybody to collaborate, and so I'm excited about that. I think I'm going to have a controversial take, especially given my title
go.
as Director of Retail Data Partnerships. But I think in the future, we won't be talking about retail data with such specificity, because I think retail data really is going to win out because of the fidelity of the signal that it brings, and it really should be ubiquitous across all media buying campaigns. Whether or not you're a shopper or e-commerce marketer who's trying to drive sales within a particular retailer, or if you're a brand national marketer or a non-endemic brand, all of that really can grow and be powered by retail data because it's based on these shopper profiles. So I hope that we're going to be talking less about retail data and more about the power of this data and how we can actually grow it and really evolve the standardization and the best practices and what can we actually do with this that becomes really exciting. How can you leverage this data to grow category share or steal competitive share or just drive overall growth in general. And so that's what I think will be.
Nice.
Yeah, agree with those. Maybe one thing, just to sort of like turn it on a little bit on its head. We're here and we talk a lot about like Gen AI and kind of the science behind everything, and that is fundamental to everything that we do. We've built I think a pretty sophisticated audience offering as part of our retail media. So we've got like 1,000 off-the-shelf audiences ready to go based on all the ways that you can think about our customer, like what they buy, what stores they shop, what does like what they buy tell us about lifestyle and life stage and like all these kind of things. And like what's kind of neat about that is it's actually a blend of science and art. And so I think like if we got to remember, like this is still marketing, this is still advertising, like the data informs a message. Like it's not the data that actually breaks through. The data helps you learn what is going to break through. But that kind of like, let's think a little bit more about that sort of science and art and the creativity that this can start to like bring back into the practice of marketing. And so I think there's a lot of cool things. And Gen AI will absolutely help that, and personalization, like the science will always be there. But I think it'll be a cool, like when we get to that moment where we're thinking about like harnessing the data in really creative human ways as well, that'll be really cool. And then I think just the other thing is like retail media, like it always sort of gets, where we've started is like it's conversion, it's sales. Yes, everything should drive sales, but I think we'll hear a lot more about like how retail media is more than just a lower funnel thing. It's an upper funnel thing. Again, like we know so much about like, about like lifestyle, life stage. It's a great asset for like brand building and breaking through with your customer. And so I think that's going to be really exciting as we start to see much better case studies around that.
Love it. Yeah, we're entering, I don't know if it's the second or third phase of the retail media network and monetization, epic or era, whichever we're in. And so clearly we've got Dick's Sporting Goods and Loblaw together partnered with Trade Desk, doing great things with their first-party data first and foremost. That's opening up these new opportunities to, again, better deliver experiences to customers that drive sales. And so we're so thankful for your partnership and the work that we're doing and we'll do together. And so we'll, I guess this is recorded, so we'll be able to check the tape next year when we have this discussion again. But everybody, please join me in thanking Ben and Sarah and Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you all.
We're out of time.